Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, where wisdom is worth sharing. Wishing you a pleasant listening experience. Today, I'm going to interpret a book called Atomic Habits. Subtitle: How to Develop Good Habits and Break Bad Ones. Habits are crucial in shaping a person's life. The author, James Clear, wrote this book because he deeply experienced the astounding power of habits. They helped him emerge from personal struggles. In high school, Clear suffered a serious facial injury from being struck by a baseball bat between his eyes. The impact caused multiple facial fractures and severe brain swelling, resulting in occasional seizures. Despite starting baseball at the age of 4 and aspiring to be a professional player, this injury prevented him from training for a long time and led to him being expelled from the school team. Later, during his college years, Clear restarted his baseball journey and was selected for the All-American team by the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, ESPN. Only 33 athletes were chosen nationwide, and Clear was among them. Upon graduation, he was awarded the university's highest honor, the President's Medal. His ability to rise from such a significant setback was all thanks to the power of habits, which inspired him to write this book. He wanted to share his methods of cultivating habits with more people, empowering them to harness the strength of habits. Clear also founded the Habits Academy, with over 10,000 graduates, including managers, teachers, and employees from numerous Fortune 500 companies who attend the training at his academy. Now that we understand the importance of habits, the question arises, how do we change our habits? This is a concern shared by many. The initial response may be to rely on sheer willpower, but the author believes that changing habits is not as difficult as we imagine. The problem lies not in the lack of willpower but in the flawed approach. Many people attempt to develop habits by setting goals, like establishing a reading habit, and create reading schedules for themselves, reading a certain number of pages or spending a specific amount of time daily. However, they often give up after a few days. So, what approach is more effective? The author suggests that to change habits, one should focus on identity rather than goals. In simple terms, it's about who you want to become. To foster a reading habit, for instance, it's more effective to see yourself as someone who loves reading rather than merely following a reading plan. Once you change your perception of yourself, you will naturally act in line with that identity, leading you to read more books and reinforcing your identity. Thus, the key to changing habits is not to start with the goal but with your identity. Now, how do you go about making these changes? The author gives us 2 pieces of advice. Firstly, start with small habits, and secondly, establish a 4-step model for cultivating habits: cue, craving, response, and reward. Now, let's dive into these 2 aspects and explore the book Atomic Habits. In the first part, let's discuss the author's first advice: why small habits are essential. We all know that habits are significant, but often, we tend to focus on prominent habits while overlooking inconspicuous ones. We might set ambitious goals, like waking up at 6 a.m. daily, regardless of our usual late-night sleeping habits. However, few people consider starting small, aiming to wake up just 5 minutes earlier each day, gradually working towards the 6 a.m. goal. For someone used to staying up late and waking up at 8 or 9 a.m., suddenly shifting to a 6 a.m. routine seems overwhelming. It's much easier to achieve the goal when approached gradually, adjusting the wake-up time by 5 minutes each day until reaching the desired goal. We've all heard the saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, but when we tackle tasks, we often have the misconception that we must accomplish everything at once. For instance, if you want to lose weight, you might decide to skip dinner entirely from now on. Or if you want to write a book, you set a target of writing 10,000 words a day or 1,000 words per hour, thinking it's achievable. This constant pressure to make visible changes makes us feel closer to success. However, this approach is usually unsustainable. The author points out that we tend to focus on the critical moments of change while neglecting the subtle changes that lead to success. These small, almost imperceptible adjustments often go unnoticed, but they hold great power. We underestimate the force of time. To illustrate this, the author shares an example involving Dave Brailsford in 2003. He was appointed as the head coach by the British Cycling Federation, which had achieved minimal success in the previous century. Over the next 5 years under Brailsford's guidance, the British cycling team's performance saw a remarkable transformation. In the 2008 Beijing Olympics, they won 8 gold medals in road and track cycling events, surpassing their total gold medals won in the previous century. Brailsford's training strategy was known as the aggregation of marginal gains, which involved seeking improvement in every detail, no matter how minute. They paid meticulous attention to every aspect, such as rubbing the tires with alcohol to improve grip, providing cyclists with heated shorts to maintain optimal muscle temperature, and testing various materials for racing suits to minimize air resistance. Even the team's trucks were painted white inside to detect dust particles that might impact the bike's performance. These seemingly insignificant details were all given considerable importance by the team, and their relentless focus on improving every small aspect resulted in one victory after another for the previously unknown British cycling team. You see, the impact of each tiny improvement is much greater than we imagine. Our life is not a collection of isolated moments but rather an exponential curve of growth. Success or failure may seem to happen suddenly at a certain crucial moment, but in reality, it has been accumulating long before and only appears in front of us when the time is right. The author uses an analogy in the book, likening this process to adjusting the course of an airplane. Imagine you are flying a plane from Los Angeles, and by simply adjusting the plane's heading south by 3.5 degrees, after a few hours, you will land in Washington, not New York. The two destinations are about 360 kilometers apart. Although we understand how crucial small habits are, it can still be challenging to take action and develop good habits or break bad ones. The reason is that these habits are often tiny, and it may take a long time before we see noticeable results. We tend to lose motivation when we can't see immediate feedback for our efforts. Even when we persist for a while, and the change is not yet apparent, it becomes demotivating, and we may question if our efforts are in vain. So, how can we more effectively cultivate small habits? The author suggests that the better way to change habits is to focus on systems rather than setting goals. This might sound abstract, but it's quite straightforward. For example, if you're an entrepreneur with a profit goal, your system could involve testing product ideas, hiring employees, and conducting marketing. When you do well in each of these components, the probability of achieving your profit goal increases. Setting only specific goals may not help you form the habit of studying diligently or maintaining a regular workout routine. Instead, when you focus on the entire system and make gradual improvements in each aspect, you unconsciously develop the desired habit. This is because when you set a goal, you expect yourself to achieve it, and you'll only experience happiness upon reaching the goal, which may take a long time. However, when you concentrate on the system, every little progress brings you immediate joy, giving you the motivation to persist. It's like the concept of the flywheel effect, which states that initially, it might be challenging to set a wheel into motion. You need to push it in the same direction, making small revolutions one after another. But after a while, the wheel gains momentum, and it starts rotating faster on its own, requiring less effort. The same principle applies to changing habits. At the beginning, it might be challenging and require persistent effort, but over time, as you accumulate these small changes and habits, your life will be significantly different from what it used to be. To sum it up, significant changes don't occur suddenly, they result from the gradual accumulation of small improvements. To change habits effectively, the key is not to focus on a grand goal but to pay attention to every tiny effort. Now, we've covered the topic of small efforts. Let's talk about another suggestion the author gives us, which is to establish a 4-step model for cultivating habits. These steps are cue, craving, response, and reward, and they correspond to the 4 laws of behavior change. Let's go through them one by one. The first step is to set cues. All changes stem from a gap between the current situation and our expectations. Only when you are dissatisfied with the status quo will you consider making changes. This recognition is not difficult, but putting it into practice can be more challenging. We tend to rely on familiar routines to solve problems, and because they are so ingrained, we may not even realize them. For example, if you wake up at 8 a.m. every day, over time, you may find that you no longer need to set an alarm, you naturally wake up at that time. Your body has developed an automatic response to this cue. But when you have to wake up early to catch a flight, you need to set several alarms the night before and force yourself to get up early. In this case, the alarm acts as a cue, reminding you to change your behavior. To effectively set cues, the book provides various tips, which I've summarized into 3 points. Firstly, you must identify which habits you want to change. Only by recognizing them can you make changes. The book suggests creating a habit scorecard, where you list all your daily habits and then evaluate each one as good, bad, or something to continue. You mark them with a plus sign, minus sign, or equal sign, respectively. By the way, the author presents an interesting perspective that habits don't have inherent good or bad qualities, it's more about whether they are effective or not. People can generally be classified into two types, larks and owls. Larks are more alert in the morning, while owls are the opposite, being more focused in the evening. Forcing owls to wake up early may lead to reduced efficiency. The key to evaluating a habit is to consider your goals and whether the habit contributes positively to achieving them. Once you've identified the habits you want to change, you can begin to take action. Many times, the lack of motivation is not the issue, it's the lack of a clear plan. For instance, if you want to cultivate the habit of waking up early, don't just stick a note at your bedside that says, "Wake up early." Instead, write down specific details like when, where, and what you'll do upon waking up. The more detailed, the better. With a clear plan and cues in place, you are on your way to building positive habits. So, how can we change bad habits? You can start by acknowledging the bad habit and saying it out loud. For example, if you want to stop eating junk food, before eating chips, you can say to yourself, "I want to eat chips, but they make me gain weight and harm my health." This might seem silly, but there is scientific evidence behind it. We know that the left brain is responsible for language and logic. When you speak a sentence, your brain has already processed the information, turning your unconscious response into a conscious action. It reminds you of what you are doing. Speaking aloud can help us become more aware of our actions and prompt us to change. To make changes effectively, it's important to proceed in an organized manner. You may have multiple habits you want to change, but trying to change them all at once is not advisable. Our bodies tend to follow existing patterns, so it's most efficient to change one habit at a time. Changing a habit already requires additional energy, and trying to change several habits simultaneously may result in failure to change any of them. A more effective approach to changing multiple habits is habit stacking. Once you've cultivated one new habit, you can build another one on top of it. Actions are not isolated, people tend to create associations between them. For instance, after establishing the habit of waking up early, you can add a 5-minute meditation session on top of it. The established habit will serve as a reminder of what to do next. By doing this, you won't forget the original habit and won't have to rely heavily on willpower to keep going. In addition to taking proactive steps to change, there's a simpler method of leveraging the external environment to help yourself change. This is called environment design. In essence, if you want to cultivate a good habit, create an environment that supports its development. If you want to break a bad habit, try to separate it from the triggers and environmental cues that initiate it. For instance, if you want to reduce phone use before bedtime and cultivate a habit of reading before sleep, you can place the phone on your desk or in another room and keep a few books on your bedside table. With distractions removed, reading will naturally become a part of your bedtime routine. The author also emphasizes that we can change habits, but we won't forget them. Once a habit is formed, it doesn't disappear, even if we replace it with a new one. There's still a possibility of the original habit resurfacing if the conditions trigger it. For example, even if you've developed a good habit of reading before sleep, if one day you absent-mindedly place your phone on the book, you might end up using the phone instead of reading because the brain prefers easy and simple information. So, the first step is to set cues. Next, it's time to take action. To reduce the difficulty of change and make it more voluntary, you need to harness the power of emotions, an internal force. Let's call the second step, desire. This is our motivation for change. The deepest desire of a person is to reduce uncertainty and gain rewards, which can be summed up as seeking benefits and avoiding harm. Therefore, to change a habit, you must make the new habit more attractive. Specifically, we can turn the good habit we want to cultivate into a reward and the bad habit we want to change into a loss. To make a habit more attractive, we need to consider why we can't resist the temptation of grabbing a bag of chips or a cup of milk tea. Think back to the moment when you're eating chips. The golden appearance and crispy texture create a wonderful sensation, and your body automatically releases a substance called dopamine, making you feel pleasure. This dopamine is the key to the attraction of a certain behavior. When we expect to experience happiness, we take action, and our anticipation of the reward can be even stronger than the reward itself. Sometimes, we encounter situations where we are highly motivated to obtain something we desire. We work hard and don't feel tired, regardless of the effort put in. However, when we finally obtain it, the happiness might only last for a few days. This shows that to make a habit more attractive, we must make it a source of anticipation and stimulate the secretion of dopamine. You can associate the good habit you want to cultivate with something you enjoy. When you start to anticipate the reward, the action won't feel difficult. An example of using this principle is what the American Broadcasting Company, ABC, did to cultivate the habit of watching TV shows in their audience. They encouraged viewers to make popcorn and have red wine on Thursday nights, relaxing in front of the television, enjoying a wonderful evening. By associating Thursday night TV shows with the enjoyment of popcorn and wine, they linked the habit of watching TV to a pleasant experience. Similarly, for breaking bad habits, you need to change your mindset and realize that giving up the bad habit won't reduce your happiness. Instead, it will lead to more lasting happiness. For instance, if you want to stop spending money recklessly, you can tell yourself that spending money on unnecessary things won't improve your quality of life and will increase your financial burden. By saving that money, you will have more resources when you genuinely need something in the future. Once you take action and cultivate a habit, the next step is repetition. Developing a new habit is not a one-time event, it's an ongoing process. The more you repeat a behavior, the deeper your brain will remember it, and this new behavior will replace your existing patterns and become an automatic response. Our brains naturally prefer the most effortless way to solve problems and conserve experiences. This is known as the law of least effort, which applies to our behavior as well. The more energy a behavior consumes, the less likely we are to take that action. To make a habit easier to stick with, you need to minimize resistance. The book provides 2 methods for reducing resistance. The first is to create shortcuts for the future, such as organizing things in advance to make subsequent actions easier. For example, tidying up your desk after work and placing stationery in specific locations will make it easier to find them the next day, increasing your efficiency at work. The second method is called the 2-minute rule. When developing a new habit, keep it within a 2-minute time frame. You might wonder if this contradicts the idea of building habits that last longer over time. For instance, if you want to cultivate a reading habit, shouldn't you spend at least half an hour? However, you can look at it differently. Instead of spending 2 minutes reading 2 pages, which seems much easier than finishing an entire book, you might end up continuing to read more than just 2 pages. Once you start, you tend to get drawn in and continue. By reducing the psychological burden and making the initial action simple, you can initiate the behavior more easily. In fact, all habits can be condensed into a 2-minute version. For example, with exercise, you can start with just 1 sit-up. For tidying the kitchen, washing 1 dish is enough. When you begin an action, you will often find yourself doing more without even realizing it. At what point should you stop? The answer might seem counterintuitive. It's best to stop when you're feeling good. Think about how you feel when you're doing something smoothly, and suddenly a pressing matter comes up that needs immediate attention. In such situations, you feel motivated to complete that urgent task first and then return to what you were doing before. That becomes your expectation. Great writer Ernest Hemingway used this method in his writing. He would stop writing when he was on a roll, so even if he didn't have inspiration the next day, he could pick up where he left off and continue. As he continued writing, new inspiration would be sparked. Now, we know what habits we want to change, are willing to change, and have started taking action. The next step is to make the new habit something we are willing to stick with. The solution is simple: make them enjoyable. This is the final step in changing habits: rewards. Let me share with you a true story. In the 1990s, in Karachi, Pakistan's economic center, the hygiene conditions were terrible, with over half the residents living in slums. The so-called houses were made from old wooden boards, coal-baked bricks, and other discarded materials. Garbage was scattered all over the streets, and with the dense population, people easily contracted various diseases. A health worker named Stephen R. Luby recognized this public health crisis and discovered that something as simple as handwashing could greatly improve people's health. However, even though people knew that handwashing was essential, they had not formed the habit. So, Luby came up with a solution. He started providing residents with a new kind of soap that produced more foam and had a pleasant fragrance. People found that handwashing was no longer a cumbersome process but an enjoyable experience. Gradually, more and more people developed the habit of washing their hands regularly. How can habits become enjoyable experiences? The book provides several methods, all summarized in one principle: make feedback immediate and visible. After you complete a habit action, reward yourself promptly. It's also crucial to make the benefits of these new habits evident. Our brains prefer short-term, certain rewards. For example, if you want to develop a financial habit, you can keep track of your expenses. By recording every income and expenditure, you can clearly see how much you spend and save each month. You can also track habits, like writing a journal or checking in daily. Seeing each date and how long you've persisted will boost your sense of achievement, making you more willing to stick with the habit. The author also emphasizes that it's okay to have interruptions, but the key is to recover promptly and continue. Overcoming perfectionism is important because what matters is not each individual thing itself but continuously striving in the right direction. For changing a bad habit, the process is the opposite. You can turn it into something you want to stick with or something you dislike. For instance, you can inform your friends of the consequences caused by the bad habit. After all, it's embarrassing to expose your problems face to face. If that's not enough, you can make a pact with yourself and set a small penalty for repeating the bad habit. To summarize, the book, Atomic Habits, believes that changing habits is not as difficult as we think, it's just that we are using the wrong methods. The most effective way to change habits is not to set goals but to focus on systems and improve every detail. Regarding developing habits, the author proposes a 4-step model: cue, craving, response, and reward. These 4 steps correspond to 4 laws of behavior: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Finally, the author specifically reminds us that the biggest threat to success is not failure but complacency. When you repeat a behavior for too long and start feeling tired, that's when you need to increase the difficulty. There's a psychological rule called the Yerkes-Dodson law, which states that you are most motivated when you face a challenge that is slightly difficult but manageable. Too hard, and you'll want to give up; too easy, and you'll get bored. When you feel fatigued, it's a signal to add some difficulty. Reading this book made me realize that changing habits itself is not the goal, personal growth is. Habits are just tools. So when you become aware of the kind of person you want to become, the change has already begun. Your task at that point is to take action and drive the change. Habits only help you save energy and make your actions easier. That concludes the main content of this book. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you all for listening. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom with practice and achieve our financial goals, creating a better future. Thank you all, goodbye.